Hello everybody, and welcome to your last absolute value video. This video will be on how to graph an absolute value function. So as you notice, an absolute value on a graph will look like a V. And there is a spot that's called a vertex, and that's going to be the point of your V. Now the point of your V is not always going to be located at 0, 0. It will change according to your equation that you're graphing. Now I'm going to go over how to use the calculator, both the TI-84 and the TI-Inspire. If you're using a TI-84, you need to first turn it on and go ahead and click your Y equals, which is at the top left button. Clear out any equation that's already existing there. We're just going to graph an absolute value equals x. So in Y1, to find the absolute value, you need to hit the math button, which is right below the alpha button. And then you're going to scroll over 1 to the right. So using your arrows, go to the right to the word num. And you'll see the words ABS at the top. You're going to go ahead and hit enter. Now you'll see absolute values showing up on your Y1 screen, and go ahead and click the X, which again is right next to your alpha button. And you can hit the graph button and you should see the absolute value graph that's to your right. If you have a TI-Inspire, please follow these directions. Turn your calculator on, and you're going to be opening up a new document. So go ahead and hit your new document. The new document button is number 1. And no, you do not have to save if it asks you to save. We're going to be adding a graphs page, so that's number 2. And now you'll see your F1 of x. We need to make an absolute value there. So to get an absolute value there, next to the number 9 button, can you hit that funny button that's right next to it to the right? And the absolute value will be in the second column, the first one of the second column. So go ahead and hit enter once you see the absolute value. And now you can graph any absolute value. So we could go ahead and hit X and hit enter, and your absolute value function will show up. Now, the real absolute value function is continuous. It is a function because it passes the vertical line test. And meaning it's continuous, that just means that there's no breaks or jumps in your graph. What we're going to do is we're going to graph our absolute value function, example number 1 in our notes packet, the absolute value of x minus 2. So whether you're on the 84 or you're on the TI-Inspire, if you could please go ahead and follow those directions that we just did to graph an absolute value, but before you hit enter to graph it, can you make a minus 2 after your absolute value? To get out of an absolute value, you just arrow over 1 to the right, and that should get you out of the absolute value. So pause the video, go back if you have to follow the directions again to bring up an absolute value in your graphs page, but now hit minus 2 before you hit enter. So go ahead and pause the video and bring up your graph of absolute value of x minus 2. Now that you have your graph on your calculator, we need to make a table. So if you're on the TI-Inspire, to bring up your table, go ahead and hit Control-T. If you're on the 84, you want to hit the second button and the graph button again, and that will bring up your table. Now we want to graph several points so we know what your graph looks like. So when you're going to create your table, you need an X and Y. And for this one, you should have received the numbers -3, 1, -2, 0, -1, -1, 0, -2, 1, -1, 2, 0, and 3, 1. Notice I like to put the vertex in the middle of my table. Now, how do I know it's the vertex? You'll notice that all of the y values will start to repeat on either side of the vertex. So you're looking for the number that doesn't repeat, but then after it and before it, everything is repeating. So now we can go ahead and graph those points. Negative 3, 1 means to go over negative 3 on the x-axis, up 1 on the y, and graph that point. Negative 2, 0, negative 1, negative 1, 0, negative 2, 1, negative 1, 2, 0, and 3, 1. Make your V, put arrows and a label on your graph, and there's your absolute value graph. Now remember, arrows and a label for all of your graphs, and for these graphs you do need a table. So let's look at the second example. On the next page, the next example has a negative 2 before the absolute value. So when you go to your calculator, follow the same steps as before. If you're on the 84, you're going to hit the y equals button, clear everything out. To find the absolute value, actually before you hit absolute value, you need a negative 2. So go ahead and do negative 2. To bring up the absolute value, hit math, num, and now absolute value, and do x plus 3 all inside. If you're on the Inspire, go ahead and hit your on button, new document, no you do not want to save, add a graph. To bring up the absolute value, first before the absolute value, put in a negative 2. To bring up the absolute value is the button next to the 9. And it should already be highlighted, but it's this first one in the second row. And then go ahead and do x plus 3 inside of your absolute value. Hit enter. You should notice that your absolute value graph is upside down. That's because there is a negative in front of the absolute value. That will make all your absolute value graphs go upside down. So go ahead and bring up your table, either second graph or Control T, depending on your calculator, and make your table. Remember, try to get the vertex in the middle of your table. So your table should look something like this. Negative 6, negative 6, negative 5, negative 4, negative 4, negative 2, negative 3, 0, negative 2, negative 2, negative 1, negative 4, 0, negative 6. Again, you'll notice some of your numbers will be repeating. The one that did not repeat is the vertex. Pause the video, graph these points, please. Once you have all your points, make sure you connect your dots, arrows, and a label on all your graphs. Y equals negative 2 absolute value x plus 3, and now you're done. Try example number 3, pause your video, and I'll show you the graph in just a moment. So this one had a combination of a number before the absolute value and a number outside of the absolute value. If in your table it comes up with decimal points, just skip some of those points and only graph the points that you like and you can actually graph. So as you can see my table here, I have my vertex in the middle, I've graphed my equation, and I have arrows and a label. So please come in tomorrow ready to do some graphs. Have a nice night.